Well, we're finally on the home stretch of my Courage the Cowardly Dog seasonal review. And the next episode on the list is Queen of the Black Puddle. This one, in a way, is a bit of a different episode because this is one of the few times that the villain isn't intending on harming the whole family, or just Muriel. Nope, this one is all eyes for Eustace. It's about what I assume is a nymph who's been dubbed the Black Puddle Queen, hypnotizing Eustace and taking him to her underwater worlds. Now, honestly, I don't have too much to go over from the first half. It's just used to show the many different ways the nymph shows herself to Eustace. But I do admire the creativity of it, and I like the payoffs when Courage goes to get Muriel.
Oh my, I'm beginning to worry about you, Eustace.
Aside from that, not much to say until the nymph takes Eustace as he sleeps back to her puddle, and Muriel sobbing her eyes out because Eustace is gone. Courage, if she doesn't like Eustace hurting you, she isn't gonna like you hurting you. Come on, I thought you knew this woman. So Courage figures the only way to cheer Muriel up is to save Eustace, and after jumping to the puddle, Courage realizes that the puddle is a doorway to his stand-up comedy club where his Uncle Boneless is telling jokes, and Courage joins Eustace and they laugh together as the episode ends. Wait, that's the Cow and Chicken episode, The Laughing Puddle. Huh. I don't know what I'm more blown away by, that I've never talked about Cow and Chicken up to this point, or that two separate Cartoon Network shows made episodes focused around puddles only 2 years apart. Well, Courage catches the nymph trying to eat Eustace and a really good chase scene occurs, and it ends with Courage freeing Eustace by swimming through a puddle of Muriel's tears.
Oh, Eustace, you're back. Where have you been?
Ow! What did I do?
Well, for the most part, this episode seems to be more focused on being atmospheric. And while I guess I can see how its atmosphere would be a hit for a few fans of the show, it wasn't really too big of a hit for me. I certainly found the Black Puddle Queen interesting, and I would have liked to see what else they could have done with her, because I don't feel they did enough with her, but I guess it was a decent change of pace to see Courage save just Eustace, and at least the episode shows how much Muriel cares for Eustace, and actually uses that caring in a way where it saves the two. Not too bad of an episode, but not exactly one of the best of this season either. Next is Everyone Wants to Direct, which is about a zombie director named Benton Tarantella. Hey, great parody choice! Who comes to the house saying he wants to make a movie in the house about zombies and offers to pay Eustace top dollar for the house and to make Muriel the lead actress. And Courage finds out that Tarantella had a partner named Aaron von Volkheim, a parody of silent film star Erich von Stroheim, with whom he would go to people's houses with posing as a directing team, and, well, they'd kill them.
Amateur filmmakers slay 12. Benton Tarantella and Errol van Volkheim pose as film directors to lure unsuspecting victims to their fate.
Damn, now Courage is working in the serial killer team-up. That's awesome. Honestly, while I know 90s times were different, it's still hard to believe that a cartoon show used to get away with stuff like this. I mean, name a current Cartoon Network show that's worked in serial killers. No, really, if there's any that exist, please let me know. I'm so behind with current cartoon shows that would actually give me a good place to start. Tarantella is a really enjoyable bad guy as well, and his partner isn't too bad either. Also, the way Courage defeats these two is genius. I won't reveal it, but let's just say it plays off of what most directors will do. Kinda like King Ramses' Curse and the Duck Brothers, I would say this is one of those episodes that's so enjoyable because of how entertaining the bad guy is. It's definitely an episode I'd recommend from this season, but to be honest, that's been quite a common theme so far.
I'm going to promote you to director.
What's the pay?
Tons.
Deal!
Next we have The Snowman Cometh, and I gotta say, this episode has a really interesting plot point. It's about Courage and his owners going to Antarctica, where Courage comes across a snowman who wants to steal Muriel and Eustace's anti-melting gene. Why? Well, because the Arctics are getting warmer and soon he'll melt. Well, how do you like that? It's got a subtle message towards global warming, and kudos to it for not being preachy about it. Now the snowman here, he's not a bad antagonist either. He's kind of like Jack Frost with a little bit more class to him.
And what do you think you're doing? Put that back.
The only real issue I have with him is, well, his name. His name is literally just Snowman.
No, the name's Man. Snowman.
Come on, guys, you could have been a little bit more creative with that. Like, the name's Roy, Polaroid. Or, the name's Lou, Igloo. Or, probably the most fitting, the name's Gore, Al Gore. Well, time to see how old my fan base is now. Yeah, trust me, there's a lot more frozen jokes throughout this episode too. Including this one, which is by far my favorite of the whole episode.
Oh, my. It's frozen. Isn't that a laugh? Did your soup freeze too?
For the most part, I thoroughly enjoyed this episode. It's very entertaining, and I can't help but appreciate its subtle message about global warming. A pretty cool episode.
You stupid dog.
That's what I tell him all the time. You stupid dog, you stupid dog.
Next up is the precious, wonderful, adorable, lovable Duckling. What the hell kind of a title is that? That's borderline imposter's home for, make 'em up pals in terms of a mouthful. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. This episode is up there with Courage Meets Bigfoot as my least favorite of the season. It's about Courage saving an egg that hasn't hatched yet and Eustace tries to cook it. But it turns out a baby duck has already formed inside of it and it thinks Eustace is its mom, even when Eustace throws it. So to get on Eustace's good side, the Duckling constantly beats up Courage and serves to Eustace's every demand. Now, to be fair, even though Eustace is a jerk-off, he has gotten the short end of the stick in pretty much every episode so far. So, it's kind of interesting to see an episode where the villain actually takes care of him. But kind of like what I said about It's a Wishful Life in my Homer's Enemy review, the biggest issue I have with it is the presentation. Not only is the Duckling attacking the character that saved it, other characters like Muriel feel a bit out of character because she doesn't want to believe the Duckling is evil.
Courage, how did you get that teacup on your head? Oh, no, Courage. Not that precious, wonderful, adorable, lovable Duckling.
Okay, that's phallic. And I get what it's doing. It's the whole, the cute creature would never do something like that because they're too cute gag. Or in simpler terms, the sweet and sour gag. And yes, I know this episode came first, but I refuse to name that gag after a title like this. But the thing is, Muriel never seems to know what Courage is talking about anyway. They very easily could have just done the same here where Courage tries to tell her that the duck is evil, but she just can't understand him like most of these episodes seem to go. Here, she actually knows he's blaming the duck and she just refuses to believe it. So, I guess that's why it feels a bit out of character for me. And it's honestly unpleasant for me to see Courage get framed for every little thing this duck does. Like, this duck is so infuriating every time it screams, "Mama! Mama!" that I just want to see Courage throw it again every time it screams that. And when it laughs as it gets Courage into trouble, it gives off an almost Bendy-like vibe. That being said, there's quite a lot I can at least forgive about this episode. I at least get the vibe that this episode is hinting that this is what it's like having an adorable little sibling and how they can get away with anything. I never really had this problem myself, but I have heard stories from other people that are kinda similar to how this episode is being portrayed. So I can see how this would at least be a relatable episode, and the ending when Muriel realizes the duck is evil is pretty satisfying too. So while I'm not a fan of it myself, I can certainly admit it's nowhere near as bad as it could have been. It's simply just not an episode for me.
I guess he wasn't such a precious, wonderful, adorable, lovable duckling.
Next we have Heads of Beef. This episode is about Muriel getting sick and being unable to make dinner, so Eustace and Courage go out to a burger shop to eat. And Courage suspects the butcher, who's, yes, a giant pig, is pulling a Sweeney Todd and killing the customers to make the meat. And the suspicion of his grows after he overhears the butcher telling his wife about Courage, and his wife says she hasn't had dog in a long time. And to be honest, this episode is when I finally realize I'm running out of things to say about some of these Courage episodes. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does show that the show is sticking very close to its formula and only changing what's necessary, which I think is a big reason why I found myself loving most of these episodes. I will say this episode is probably one of the weaker ones, as it only consists of Courage thinking that the pigs are turning their customers into meat, and him trying to avoid being caught by them, and honestly nothing really stands out too much with this episode. But it does have a good twist ending, which I of course won't reveal. But I really didn't expect them to end this episode the way they did, and trust me calling it a weak episode isn't an insult in the slightest. It's just more of an example of how great this season has been so far.
I still want to sink my teeth into that cute little dog.
Now we move on to Club Cats. Well, I guess we know who the main antagonist of the show is now. This episode is about Courage and his owners going on a cruise and getting shipwrecked on an island where Cats just so happens to be.
What are the odds?
Well, Cats has apparently taken the survivors of the cruise and turning them into machines, and he turns Muriel into a washing machine and Eustace into a wrecking ball before having them fight gladiator style.
Eustace, you're really going over the line here.
Can't help it. I'm a wrecking ball.
Now, I'm pretty sure this idea is a take on The Deadliest Game by Richard Cannell, and if it is a take on that, then it actually makes a lot of sense why they'd pick Cats to be the antagonist of this episode. He's a classy, sophisticated villain just like General Zareth is. It's actually pretty fitting casting. There's also some really clever comedic writing in this episode. For example, when Eustace initially doesn't want to go on the cruise and makes this comment.
Blah, blah, blah. I'm not getting out of this chair. Nope, not getting out of this chair.
Now, they very easily could have made that a one-off gag, but they make this a legitimate plot device and get as much humor out of it as they possibly can. There's also this joke with the cruise ship, which is very clever in a subtle way.
No damage. As you were.
Now, for those who don't get this joke, there's this common theory about the Titanic that if it hit the iceberg head-on, it either wouldn't have sank or would have sank a lot slower. And if it sank a lot slower, the RMS Carpathia probably would have shown up before the ship sank and more lives could have been saved. While I don't know how true that theory is, I'm pretty damn impressed the show was able to make a subtle joke towards that theory. I would say this joke is probably my second favorite joke in the whole season, right behind what's 414 divided by 6. And overall, it's a wonderful episode. It's funny, entertaining, and encompasses a lot of the things that make Courage the Cowardly Dog so good.
I say, don't you want your root beer?
Next, we have The Revenge of the Chicken from Outer Space. Revenge of? Wait, wouldn't that mean that this is a sequel? Yes, it does. Technically, this episode is a sequel to an episode called The Chicken from Outer Space. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking I skipped an episode. Well, yes and no. Technically, The Chicken from Outer Space was the first episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog, but it wasn't actually in Courage the Cowardly Dog. It was in a showcase series called What a Cartoon, which is where quite a few popular 90s cartoons got their start. Courage the Cowardly Dog, Powerpuff Girls, Johnny Bravo, quite a few great shows. In fact, The Chicken from Outer Space was nominated for an Oscar for Best Animated Short Film, and there are quite a few references to it in this episode as you'd expect from a sequel.
This shouldn't happen to a dog. Ouch!
This still shouldn't happen to a dog.
What this episode centers around is the chicken coming back, but this time it's a fried chicken with no head, and its goal is to find a new head. And through some fun little visual humor, the chicken reveals to Courage that it wants his head, since Courage was the one who fried it. Though, in the first episode, that's not exactly what happened. The chicken actually fired at Courage and missed and ended up frying itself. If anyone should have a grudge with Courage over being fried, it should be Eustace. Oh my god, it finally makes sense why Eustace hates Courage. Well, this episode is also a nice little episode. Despite the villain not even having a head to communicate with, there's still a lot of character to it with its motions. And when the chicken gets Eustace's head, it's really funny. Again, not the best episode by far, but that's been a tall order all season anyway.
Oh, There's Eustace with my slipper.
Next is Journey to the Center of Nowhere, which, let me tell you right now, that title is one of the most misleading titles in the show. Now, just hearing this title and seeing this title card, what would you expect this episode to be about? Well, the title is based off of the 1864 novel Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne, though I doubt most kids who saw this episode either read the book or saw any of the film adaptations before this episode came out. I said before this episode came out. Plus, I don't even think that one's an adaptation. So, they probably see this title and think it's about Courage battling it out with some kind of demon-like devil monster or something. But no, it's about a bad drought happening in nowhere, and while Courage is digging to find more water, he drops in on a bunch of eggplants that went crazy and want to cook Muriel because she's made so many of their fellow eggplants into entrees.
We shall invade the above world and attack the one called Muriel.
Well, I gotta give it credit, that really wasn't what I was expecting based off this title card. Though, I can't exactly say this is an interesting payoff. Actually, this episode does manage to have a few great moments in it, including using that gag where Courage tries to tell Muriel what's going on, only for her to not understand him in a way that not only keeps the joke fresh, but actually moves the plot along. Courage dresses up as an eggplant to tell Muriel that some eggplants want to kill her, and Eustace finds him and throws him back down the hole still in his eggplant suit. And the eggplants, who refuse to attack until their leader gives them some kind of go-ahead, think Courage is their leader. So Courage uses this to make some comedic moments.
The great eggplant says, run in place!
And this isn't just filler. Because these eggplants think he's their leader, they explain their plan to him in full detail. And when they find out he was just wearing a costume, they assume Muriel sent a spy, decide to forget waiting for their leader, and start their attack.
No more waiting for the great eggplant. Fellow eggplants, attack!
Now, I don't think I'd call this one of the better episodes, but this one seemed like it had potential to be as bad as Courage Meets Bigfoot, or that too long of a title Duck episode. And in the end, it was a fine episode because they went a little above and beyond with their material. I'd say it's worth at least one watch.
The great eggplant says, do this!
Next up is Little Muriel. Now, going into these seasonal reviews, there were only a handful of episodes I fully remembered from when I was a kid from this season. King Ramsay's Curse, The Duck Brothers, Freaky Fred, The Demon in the Mattress, and Little Muriel. Little Muriel was probably my least favorite one of these episodes, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It's still a pretty enjoyable episode. Courage ends up accidentally gluing Muriel to her chair just as a tornado hits nowhere, and the tornado sucks her in and turns her into a 3-year-old Irish version of Lil from the Rugrats.
I'm Muriel. I'm only 3.5 years old. Who are you? You want the button, Philip? You can't handle the button!
And Muriel becomes the biggest brat on the face of the planet, which, considering the fact that she was one of the nicest old ladies ever, is actually pretty hilarious.
This stinks! I hate it this way.
What's wrong with it?
Less cheese! Oh, perfect! I hate macaroni and cheese.
Again, I don't think it's a bad episode at all. I do find it kind of charming. The only issue I do have with it is that I feel they didn't take full advantage with this episode, because there's a few scenes that just feel like filler. But luckily they don't bring the episode down too much, and honestly, I almost always enjoy episodes where the main characters have their ages messed with. Those always end up being fun episodes, and this one is no exception.
Guess what I found? Booga booga booga!
And finally, we end the seasonal review with the Great Fusilli. Now, this is actually pretty interesting because, truthfully, I didn't really remember this episode, but it's since gained a lot of recognition ever since YouTubers like Watcher of the 2000s and Red Leopard Videos put it on their list of the top 10 creepiest Courage the Cowardly Dog episodes. The episode is about a showman called the Great Fusilli, voiced by Jim Cummings, coming to nowhere and recruiting Muriel, Eustace, and Courage for actors in his shows. But Courage finds out that Fusilli is actually turning his actors into marionette puppets so he can keep them in his shows forever.
Eustace, Muriel! Doggy! No!
Now this episode is like the anti-Night of the Werewolf for me. It doesn't start off too strongly, the comedy seems kind of lacking, and the pace is really slow. But then it mixes it up heavily in a way you would never see coming your first time around, when it's revealed that Fusilli was turning his actors into puppets, and rapidly picks up pace from there. And the scene where they get transformed is pretty freaky, not just because marionette puppets are absolutely terrifying, but also because Jim Cummings downright nails this evil and chilling laugh.
Oh, I don't feel quite myself.
Also, the way Courage defeats Fusilli is hilarious and entertaining despite being less than a minute long. But honestly, none of this is the reason that these YouTubers consider this a creepy Courage episode. That reason comes from the ending when Courage saves his owners.
Stupid dog! Booga booga booga!
Now the argument here is that this was the end of the first season, and at the time, it wasn't known if Courage was going to get renewed for a second season. So this would have meant that the series would have ended with Courage going visibly insane and trying to keep his family together by making their puppet versions appear alive. And I must say, when you put it like that, it sounds pretty damn haunting. Now I'll admit it's clear that continuity isn't a big thing in Courage. I mean, they've ended quite a few episodes from this season with Eustace being decapitated, stranded on the moon, turned into a puddle of water, turned into a giant wrecking ball, and trapped by a pharaoh's curse among many other misfortunes. And each time, he comes back perfectly fine. But the thing is, if any of those episodes were the series finale, they wouldn't be anywhere near as haunting because there's at least an implication that he's still alive. This one, there's more of an implication that Eustace and Muriel are gone for good. And it's the only time where both of them are left in a bad state. And considering how John R. Dilworth seems to enjoy going as out there as possible with his disturbing implications, it wouldn't surprise me if he actually meant to end this show with the implication that Courage, to this day, is playing with his dead owner's remains trying to keep his family together. Overall though, this episode is pretty damn good. It's an excellent end to the first season. And if it were the series finale and the show never got a second season, it would have ended the show the way Courage was, at the time, meant to be ended. Seeing as, aside from the Hunchback of Nowhere, they hadn't really tried any heartfelt messages and stayed as a strictly horror-based show, with some comedic episodes thrown in. This would have been the ending that summed up the whole series to me. Definitely one I'm glad to see is getting some recognition.
The things I do for love.
And this season's overall score is an 8.2, which, honestly for a first season, is pretty damn high. Aside from a few episodes that were very underwhelming or just straight up boring, there's quite a lot to recommend from this season. It started this show off on the right foot and gave us 3 more fantastic seasons after this one. If you've never seen Courage the Cowardly Dog before, it's safe to say the first season will not disappoint you. And if you're a big fan of this show, then it's safe to say the first season has a ton of rewatch value in it. Now, we get to pick what season of what show I'll be reviewing next for my next seasonal review. Honestly, you guys have given me so many great suggestions that it's impossible for me to pick. I got requests to do Teen Titans, BoJack Horseman, Steven Universe, Avatar The Last Airbender, SpongeBob, The Amazing World of Gumball, the list just goes on. So, I'm not gonna pick the shows I review in my next seasonal review. To keep it fun, I'm gonna use Wheel Decide. Now, if you're a fan of I Hate Everything, you know he uses this to pick the next movie he reviews in his search for the worst series. I think it's a great idea, and I feel like it'd be a fun way for me to do my seasonal reviews. Now, the way I'm gonna do this is whatever show and season it picks, I'm gonna replace with another show, but I'm gonna leave the 9 I had on there as is. So, let me know what the next show and season you want me to include is. Now, let's spin that wheel! Well, there you have it. The next seasonal review will be Season 1 of The Amazing World of Gumball.